Genesis chapter 38 is where we will pick up today. What a story. What promises of God. We prayed. Let's get into it. Lots of great stuff for today with the Word of God, worship of God, communion, baptism. What a beautiful... And if you'd like to be baptized, we're going to put a sign-up sheet out there for September, and we'll have another baptism here. But if you are ready today, hey, here's water, why not? So, but John's ready to go. Would you turn and read with me Genesis chapter 38, verse 1 we'll start with. And it came to pass at the time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. So what we have here is verse 36 of 37 we finished with. Now the Midianites had sold him, this is Joseph, in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. And then Genesis 39 verse 1 is going to read, Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him, and from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. So what we have in Genesis 38 is a period of an event that happens that we read here of the Judah Tamar story, and we'll get into that as we go chapter by chapter, verse by verse. But somewhere what we have here is a 20-year period, 22-year period, because Joseph's 17. We know that when he comes out of his time with Potiphar, under that enslavement, out of the prison, out of that enslavement, that the scripture is going to tell us that he's going to be 30. And so there's 13 years there. We know there's going to be 7 years of plenty. There's 7 more years. And we know 2 years into the famine, the brothers show up. So we have this 22-year gap, and God inserts this in here for a story that happens during its time. But one of the things is that God doesn't waste words. 25% of the book of Genesis is about Joseph. That's a lot of print for this one man. And we're going to come into, but it's bigger than this contrasting of Judah, one of the brothers, and his life, and his lusts, and his failing, and his impulsiveness. And we're going to see this contrast to this young man, Joseph, and just the purity of him. We're going to see the righteousness that is just emanating from this man. So you got this diamond Joseph that we're going to read 12 chapters of, with this black backdrop of darkness of the life of Judah. And yet, in both of their stories, and so we don't miss this, is the story of grace. Even in Judah, a story of grace. Even what he's going to do, as we know the story, he's going to join himself to a harlot who just is his daughter-in-law. And that strangeness of the detail of this story. Well, it's a key here is what we just read of the last time we read these boys were together, these 10 boys. Joseph's gone, Benjamin's at the house. These 10 boys that we have here is that Judah departs from them. He leaves them. He heads down to join in this Canaanite land with this man Hira, who's an Adulamite. He's part of the Canaanite culture. And this is where he goes to hang out. This is where he goes to separate. This is where he goes, if you would, on his day off. And it's interesting, Hira means nobility, but he's not a kingly nobility. He's not a line of some kingly man there in the Canaanite culture. It just means he's a recognized man. He has this reputation, and that people know him. And so there's this thing of people know him, and it's nice to be seen with him. And that's what I see here. You can dig a little deeper in the root of his name, and it can mean to splendor, to impress. I'd like to just use the word to dazzle. And so I think there's this thing of Judah, I think he's checking out from what we just read in Genesis 37. He's checking out for a while. He's going down to the world for a while. But he's dazzled with Hira and his life. He's dazzled with all that comes with Hira and the worldly life. And you know what? I think all of us can quickly just say it's easy to be dazzled by the world. The world dazzles for a moment, but it can't dazzle for a lifetime. The world will bring an emptiness at some point and a failing and a faulting, but we're going to see this man as we read through his progression of the world can dazzle and it can bring this temporary relief, but the world will always leave you desperate. And for those who are of the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So verse 2 through 5 reads, "And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her." This woman, probably introduced by this man Hira. "So she conceived," verse 3, "and bore a son, and he called his name and conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. He was at Chizdib when she bore him." God has clearly said to the family, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Jacob would have clearly told the stories. These boys know the stories. Back to Genesis 28. "Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said, 'You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan.' Just as the word came to me as my father Abraham, the word was given to him, don't let Isaac marry one of these Canaanite women. These women are immoral. These women will bring you down. We have a separation and we have a calling upon us as the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God has called us to be a special people, a separated people. God has given us a promise that he's going to make us more than the stars of the sky. God has promised us that he's going to give us this land and he's going to do these great things. And little did they know how great the promise was and how full the promise was. But here we see Judah coming to this place that he doesn't care what the promise is. I don't care. I know what Dad said. I heard Dad's story. But I'm going down to Canaan. I'm going to meet a girl there. I'm checking out and I'm going into this place. And you know what we're going to read of this man? We're going to read the Psalm 1 progression. "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly and with the hiras of the world, nor stands in the path of sinners, marrying these Canaanite women, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, joining themselves with the harlot," as he will before the chapter is over. "But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper." Verse 4, Psalm 1, "The ungodly are not so. They are like chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish." We're watching this man start this Psalm 1 progression as he's walking and sitting and joining himself with this dazzling man who everybody must know is the guy to be with. And we're going to see the friendship they have all the way through this passage that we will study here today. But you know, it's interesting. I'll tell you what I think. As verse 1 started, "And Judah departed from his brothers." We read of Judah in Genesis 37, verse 26. It was him who said, "Hey, why kill him when we can sell him?" That was his idea. I think Judah has a seared conscience. I think Judah has a guilty conscience. And I think he separates because every time I look at my brothers, I think of what we did. Are we 5 years into this? Are we 10 years into this? Or what period of time this is? I don't know what it is. But I think he is trying to check out so that he can soothe his conscience. And you know what? I've been walking with the Lord long enough. Been a pastor long enough. I've seen it enough. And I know life personally myself. It's easy to come to a place of, what's it matter now? I've totally blown it. Nothing's ever going to be right again. Why don't I just check out and call out? And I am never going to be that man that God wants me to be, that woman that God's called me to be, and these type of things. And it's so easy to go down to the world and enter into the world and be numbed by the things of the world, to find ourselves to forget what righteousness is, forget that the calling that God has for our life. I will say this, the world can bring you temporary relief, but it's only temporary. If you're thinking of going down to the world to check out, you're here for a reason, because you're not ready to just do that. Or maybe you're thinking, I shouldn't be there, and God's going to speak to you today, right here and right now. But I'll tell you this, God will bring you that moment by day. But nowhere does he promise, I'm going to bring you this comfort, I'm going to bring you over this, instantaneous. And all he ever calls us to do is the day. Today, Lord, I'm going to come, 1 John 1:9, I'm going to confess my sin. And you're faithful and just to forgive me of my sin and cleanse me from all unrighteousness. There will be a consequence to pay, as we're going to see with this man's life, but God will step into the consequence and will pay the price for that consequence, but he will make it right with us and him, and then he will work in us with this consequence of whatever that may be. But there's this place that right here, Judah could have simply came and go, whatever it is, Lord, I'm just going to come. He could easily went to the brothers and go, we were wrong. I don't know how we justify this. I don't know how we correct this. We have no idea where our brother is other than he's gone. But we can at least start with Dad and come to Dad and go, Dad, we lied. Dad, what we did, we were wrong. And that will be the beginning of the healing. But instead, he goes to numb himself out. He goes down to the world. We see that he takes total disregard to what the family's call was to not take these women. And so verse 6 comes and says, so he said to them, then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Isn't this interesting in that we watched the dads, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. We watched the calling of not take a woman. We watched go here to get a woman, a wife. They chose for them the place of the wife. And it's interesting here that Judah, he disregards the dad's word. Don't take a woman here. This is from the heart of God that we're not to marry these women. So he chooses for himself. But if you noticed here in chapter 6, then he chooses for his son, though. He chooses the wife for his son, even though he disregarded that his father would choose the wife for him. Because somehow, some way, he wants to make this choice for his son. And what I see here is Judah is passing his sin on to his son. So, Dad, what are you passing to your sons? Hey, Mom, what are you passing to your daughters? When they see what you watch, when they see what you drink, when they see what's important to you, when they see how you speak and they see how you treat and all these type of things, I think we can pass things along. We have no idea that we're passing along. But there's a beauty in there in that we can pass along things we have no idea we're passing along just because our children are watching us going. I remember a story of my one friend told the story of that I went to Bible college with, and his dad was a well-known pastor, and he goes, I got to tell you a story about my dad. I came in from outside, and he didn't know I was there. And I walked into the house, and he was watching television. This is like 90s, different TV, if you would. No remotes. And I walk in, and a commercial came on, and it was an inappropriate commercial. And I was like, oh my, what's my dad going to do? He goes, and I watched my dad. He looked at the commercial, and my dad stood up. He walked over to the television. This is the day before remotes. He goes, I'm like, what's he doing? He walked over to the television, wrapped his arms around the television, and ripped the television off the wall, and then he went and threw it on a shelf, and he left the room. He said, that's my dad. I think he said every channel will have the same. Not in my house. And it was just this, I agree, flick the channel. I don't want to get legalistic, but I just love that story. He goes, I was like, what will my dad do? And he watched his dad, and I tell you what, he became just like his dad. And he was an amazing young man, and he suffered an extreme illness, and he went home to be with the Lord. But I tell you what, that young man preached Christ until he left. And so there's a passing on that we never know who's watching, but here Judah's passing on his rebellion and disobedience onto his son, and this is what his son's going to learn as well. Well, verse 7 and 8, speaking of this son, then it goes on to say, but Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. And Judah said to Onan, go into your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother. So we're going to see this. It's called the Levirate law. We're going to read, it's an interesting study, but we have these oral laws, and then when we get into the Mosaic and Levitical laws in Exodus and Leviticus, that Mosaic comes, the Mosaic and Levitical laws, we're going to see them become codified, written, and said these are our national laws. And here in Genesis, you'll find a correlation of like 34 of these laws that would be written in Mosaic and Levitical law, written here through Genesis, and this is one of them. It'll be part of, there's a place that the family seed must continue on. And if a brother dies before child's birth, it was the responsibility of one of the brothers to raise up a seed in that wife so that the name continues on. And there's just something you could see that the Lord does, because the name Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the nation of Israel must exist, and God's putting it into these 12 boys to carry this thing on. And so this would be the responsibility of the second brother, Onan, to do this. But what was sin? We don't know. Could be what Onan's sin is that we're going to read here next in verse 9 and 10, maybe. But what was his sin? It was wicked enough that God would kill him. Think about that. Glad I'm not in the family lineage. But I'll tell you this. Knew. He knew. Because that's how God works with us. That's how he works with his people. And what I see here is so fitting is it wasn't publicly known. We don't know. But I think God sends a message. Your sin will find you out. Whether it's made public or not, you do well not to wait till it's public. But your sin will find you out. I'm giving you an opportunity to repent of it. And whatever it was, did not repent. And God dealt with him. But he knew, because that's the graciousness of God. He would have said over and over, you're going to stop this. And so verse 9 and 10, as this story continues on, but Onan knew that the heir would not be his, meaning when this child is born, he has to pay to raise him, but the child will not be his. And so when the family inheritances are divided, his actual children will get less, because the inheritance going to Tamar. And it came to pass, when he went into his brother's wife, that he omitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. Verse 10, and the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. We're adults, so thankfully I don't have to say anything more. It's an odd place to teach these things, but God chose to put this in of 50 chapters. He gives a whole chapter to this. He's making it very clear of this passage. And again, we're going to have this tremendous comparison between a Judah and a Joseph, a diamond and the black drop, and these type of things. But here's what we see here with, and you don't see it in the English jump off, but the Hebrew jumps off. It's a repeated verb tense. He did this repeatedly. So he's using her for his own satisfaction, but he has no desire at all that he is going to satisfy what her need is, and her desire is to be this mother and to have this child. And so he uses her. I think he's kind of watching his father. This is how dad uses. He doesn't care. He goes down and fulfills his lust. We're going to see this is Judah's life, this impulsiveness and the flesh. The kids are watching the parent, and here was his action. Well, verse 11 says that then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also die like his brother. And Tamar went down and dwelt in her father's house. He has no interest that he's going to give his youngest son. For some reason, I think it's part of following the Canaanite culture. He's not following the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. He's following the gods of this culture, that somehow it's like there's a repercussion or whatever. There's something wrong with her. And therefore, because there's something wrong with her, that's why my two sons die. Because when they come to know her, they end up dying. Whatever his justification is, this is how he comes. I'm not going to give my youngest son. We're going to read as we continue on. He's not going to ever consider that he's going to give his youngest son to her. But I find it ever so interesting in that Tamar is going to wait. She's going to put on her widow's clothes. She's actually going to wait. Here's a woman who was raised in the Canaanite culture of immorality. She marries this man, and yet somehow along the way, she finds herself wanting to fulfill the word, the law, the means of this family, to fulfill Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to further the name of this son. She could have easily just went back, joined her girlfriends in Canaan, and went back, if you would, to the party life or whatever the culture is. She puts on these widow clothes, and she remains faithful to that calling. So we read a chapter of a woman that I think we immediately go, wow, she's going to put on harlot clothes. This girl's messed up. But I don't want to miss, there was something about her that had some type of honor to her that drew her to, I hear the stories of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that was greater than this Canaanite culture. But she will do what the patriarchs did. She's going to take things into her own hands. And verse 12 will go on as we read while she waits. Now, in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shears at Timnah. Remember that? We'll get there someday with Samson. He and his friend, here he is. Now he's back with his dazzling friend, Hira the Adullamite. So his wife dies. And notice what he does when hard times come. He goes back to the way of the world. He goes back to, I could have went to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and said, here I am, my heart's broken. I lost my wife. But instead, he joins his friend Hira back to the world they go, and we'll read through this whole story as they go, but he joins himself back to this friend. We're going to see him now in the next verses join with what he thinks is a harlot. You know what I find in years of ministry, walking with the Lord? When people are determined to not follow and sacrifice and endure hard times of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that God that we know, they will go and choose, this is the way I'm going to go. And they will always find a Hira to come and give them a word. This is the way to go. It can even happen in the church. I'm bent on doing my thing, and I will find somebody, no matter how many people I got to go through, until I find that somebody who agrees with me of what I'm doing, even if it's wrong. Or they won't say anything. I'll just listen. I won't judge you. And here we see, instead of going to the brothers, instead of going to his father, he goes to this guy of the world who dazzles. And this guy of the world is going to go, I got an idea for you. Let's go up and have the party at the sheep shears. And that's what we're going to read next. But I just say, be careful about the people who come in agreement with you, because they'll never break your conscience of guilt that God's trying to say, don't do this. What you're doing is wrong. Don't do this. Instead, they help soothe it, and then they help and harden it. And this man keeps going in this route. But I want us to see this as we think about this, because this can be us. Or maybe it's you, and you've say, man, you have no idea how painful this is. When Tamar lost her husband, then the brother, and now she's waiting in the widow place, wearing the widow's garment. That must have hurt. And here she is, she's all alone. Here she is, waiting in her father's house, being faithful, being withholding celibate, lonely, waiting. Judah has no empathy or compassion for her. You go home, I'll send my son later. He does not see any pain in her. He has no empathy. Wow, you just lost your husband. But I tell you what, he loses his wife. We just read, what's he want? I want comforted. I need comforting. Because, man, you don't know how bad this hurt. That was my wife. And so he's coming to his friend. We're reading, I want comfort because, man, this is painful. And he wants people to look upon him with empathy and compassion. But this man had no empathy and compassion for this young girl, Tamar, and what she was going through. And if that's you, and you're like, no one knows what I'm going through, God knows. He sees you. And may he minister to you. But I also just go with this place. You know, when somebody goes through a heartache and a hardship, may we slow down long enough to just go, Lord, would you tell me what's going on in their heart? What kind of pain are they having? And then if you've been the one that's gone through the pain, you've now been put in the place of, you know what? I've been where you're at, and I know this pain, and let me come and tell you about. I know where you're at. I'll just sit and listen, and I'll say, I know that pain. Oh, the pain, that hurt. But here's Tamar. She's cast out. She gets no empathy. She gets no compassion. He's going to come. He's going to take care of himself, thinking of himself, because he's in this spiral progression of Psalm 1. He's hanging out with the wrong guy. Now they're going to have this party time, verse 13 and 15, because it's a sheep shearing time. And it was told Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow garment, covered her herself. So here she is. She's been wearing this the whole time with a veil, and wrapped herself and sat in the open place which was on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot, because she had covered her face. She's dressing as a harlot. This was common we studied that, the high places, temple prostitutes. That was part of the Canaanite religious culture. This is why Abraham, Isaac, Jacob don't marry these women from this culture. And so she's dressed like a prostitute, and this is who he thinks she is, and this is who he approaches. And so they start this conversation. Then he turned to her, verse 16, by the way, and says, "Please let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, "What will you give me that you may come to me?" And he said, "I will send a young goat from the flock." So she said, "Will you give me a pledge till you send it?" I mean, I don't trust you, obviously, because here you are. Then verse 18, he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" Here's a man who is desperate. He lets her set the terms, and she says, "Your signet and cord," maybe your translation reads bracelet, "and your staff that is in your hand." And then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. So here he is. He heads to the world for comfort. Rather impulsive at this moment. But it's interesting to me when I look at this, and we see when these things of the world and how the devil works in the things of the world. The signet was, he's a businessman, he's making a deal, and the signet ring was, here's a parchment of the deal, put the wax down, I put my signet ring, everybody goes, "Oh, that's Judah's. That's Judah." Everybody knows his, from doing business, this is Judah. And then he has these bracelets, and that's not common for the bracelet to be worn. It was a sign that he had some wealth. And so he was definitely flaunting some wealth of his possessions. And then his staff was the position that he had. I'm a shepherd. This is my staff. This is what I do for a livelihood. And people know me by what I am and what I do. And I do it very well, obviously, because of the prosperity that they have. And so we see this signet. We see the bracelet. We see the staff. And they represent the person, the possessions, and the position. And she says, "I want it all." You know, and anytime Satan wants to take you down, take you into a place, I want it all. I want it all. I want to destroy. John 10:10, I've come to steal, kill, and destroy. I want it all. I want to destroy your person, of what you're known for, and your position that you may have among the church or in the community, and I want to take your possessions and leave you bankrupt and all these type of things, and Satan leaves nothing. And it's a beautiful comparison as we'll keep reading through this. The diamond of Joseph, he can withstand the moment. And I think this Potiphar story that's coming, it wasn't a one-day thing. It was day after day after day after day. And this young man, single, could withstand her day after day after day after day. And here comes Judah. He can't even stand a day. And down he goes. And we're seeing a young man able to stand, and we see a man who's mature falling and bringing this shame. This will be his legacy forever. And verse 19 and 20, he brings the others to watch the horrible witness. So she arose and went away and laid aside her veil and put on her garments of her widowhood. She's back to being the widow again. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adullamite, this is Hira, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. So here he is. "Hey, Hira, I need you to do me a favor. You know, it's a little embarrassing what I did, but you're my friend. Hey, would you go and pay this debt for me and get my stuff back, you know, and just keep it under, you know, keep it kind of low key and these type of things." Of course, he's like, "Sure. You know, that's what we do around here. We lie, we cheat, we steal, we do whatever it takes because that's what we are." And here he is. Judah could have been from the beginning given this witness of there's a God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. and he has a promise upon my family, and he's going to do this great work. Hira, you could be part of this by coming and following after the God that has blessed us and never failed us. Instead, here he goes, hey, I need you to do me a favor to cover my sin, to cover my failing. What a horrible witness. And here he is, a man who was perishing, and this is the witness that he gives them. And of course, that's a word for all of us of what is the witness, not just for my family, but the witness of the world for my actions. Verse 21 through 23, then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. So he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. Also, the men of the place said, there was no harlot. There's no regular harlot in this place. Then Judah said, let her take them for herself, lest we be ashamed, for I sent the young goat, and you have not found her. So here it is. His life, his legacy has been established. The time to change that was before. Now this is his legacy that we read of him. And verse 24, and it came to pass about 3 months after that, Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has a baby bump, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. Isn't it amazing how sin looks in somebody else? Our very sin in somebody else. Burn them. That was, even in the Canaanite culture, there was immorality. There was the temple high places and that immorality, but between husband and wife, it was frowned upon. And we read that even down into Egypt as, hey, if you don't say you're my sister, they're going to kill me because, you're my sister, and if you're my wife, they'll kill me. And so here we see this. One of the historical writings that I read was that they would take the harlot, those who were harlotry and adultery, and dig a pit, put them in the pit, and then cover them with some tar and light them and burn them. So here is Judah, light her up, burn her. I can't believe she did such a thing. And it's amazing how we can look and just go, that's her sin's the same sin as mine, but man, mine's justified. I have a reason for mine, and we can always justify ours. But when we look at it in someone else's, there is no justification there. Let's light them up. And so, verse 25 and 26, when she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, that means if you can picture the scene, the town has rallied. They're outside the father's tent or house, whatever it may be. Bring her out. We're going to burn her. And then she says, hey, before you do this, by the man whom these belong, the signet ring, the bracelet, the staff, I am with child. And she said, please determine who these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff. So Judah acknowledged them. Imagine how humiliating this is. The whole town's here now. They're all fired up to light the fire. They're going to bring some self-righteous judgment. And he has to step up in verse 26 and say, so Judah acknowledged to them, she has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. And he never knew her again. Humbling. Verse 27 through 30, what an amazing story. As we'll read this and start moving into a communion celebration. Now it came to pass, verse 27, at the time for giving birth, that behold, twins were in her womb. And so it was that when she was giving birth, that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. Then it happened, verse 29, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly and said, how did you break through this breach upon you? Therein his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. We would end this story and go, what a mess. Well, let me say this. As we look at these boys from Genesis 37, what a dysfunctional, messed up family. When we look at this chapter, what a messed up life this girl Tamar had to live. But would you know the promises of God that he's just never done, no matter what it looks like? He's just never done. And if we ended the story, we go, well, that was a mess. What a mess of a story. Okay, so she has these two sons, and now we move into Genesis 39. We start the story of Joseph. Not yet. Not yet. Ruth chapter 4 is going to end with this. Verse 18 through 22. Now this is the genealogy of Perez. We just read it. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David. Even in this mess, through Judah, through Tamar, will come King David. But God tells even a greater story. Matthew chapter 1. This is the book of genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob begot Judah and his brothers. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Solomon by her who had been the wife of Uriah. Verse 17, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. From David until the captivity of Babylon, 14 generations. From captivity of Babylon until Christ are 14 generations. Matthew chapter 1, verse 18, now the birth of Jesus Christ was as followed. After his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child by the Holy Spirit. What a story. If we just read 38 and couldn't read the rest of the story, we go, what a mess. What a mess of a story. But instead, God is saying, you know what? What the devil intended for evil, I've turned into good. What the flesh can totally mess up, corrupt, I can take and do something mighty and great. And I can weave a story. I can tell a story about my unending, never-failing grace, and how I can step in to even the most messed up works of man and turn it into the most amazing grace of God. And before we take communion, I just want to share the romance of redemption. This story ends with this Perez going to be the father of Boaz. And so we got this Matthew, we got this Genesis 38, and God tells a love story in the middle of it. It's about me and you. And in Genesis, or in Ruth chapter 1, as we're not going to read chapter by chapter, verse by verse, but in Ruth chapter 1, here's the story is, there's a man, Elimelech. He marries a woman named Naomi. They have 2 children. They live in Bethlehem, in the land. House of bread, but a famine comes. There's no bread in the land. There's no grain. They pick up, they leave, they go to Moab. And they end up in Moab because there's no bread in Bethlehem. These 2 boys marry these 2 Moabites. One of them's named Oprah, the other's named Ruth. Hence the story of Ruth. These 2 sons die after their fathers die. So here's Naomi. My sons are dead. My husband's dead. He turns to these women. The Levirate law, I cannot birth children to you. That even if you wait and I had a baby tonight, you wouldn't wait that long for them to come and be your husbands and to take on this Levirate law that we just read. Go back to your land, Moab. fine husbands there. Go live life again, Oprah. You're right, I will. God bless thee. She didn't say that, but away she goes. And here's the story of Ruth. Ruth says to her, Ruth 1:16 and 17. But Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. Oh, it's like a marriage vow. Your God will be my God. And so then chapter 2 comes. They go back to Bethlehem because they hear that there's wheat and there's food. So they come back. They've sold everything. They've lost everything at this point. And it says that they happened upon a field. And it just happens to be Boaz, who just happens to be part of the kinsman, a relative to this family. And so they happen upon the field. And here's what we read. So Boaz comes to the field. And the law of gleaning in the law of Israel that was codified through the Mosaic and Levitical laws was that the landowners were to leave the edges of the field unpicked so that the strangers, the poor, the impoverished could come and they could get food for themselves. But it's a beautiful picture of, but you had to go get it yourself. No one was just going to come and give it to you. You went and you got it yourself. So Ruth finds this field. She starts gleaning. Here comes the landowner. His name is Boaz. And he comes and he goes, who is that woman? Ruth chapter 2, verse 4 through 7. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, the Lord be with you. You just kind of feel the man, just the strong man of the Lord. And they answered him, the Lord bless you. Then Boaz says to his servants who was in charge of the reapers, who's that young woman over there? So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, it is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. And Boaz is saying, hey, drop some extra grain. Make sure she's taken care of. And you can just see this movement of take care of her. We've heard her story of what happened. And she came back as a stranger with Naomi. You know what's interesting about when they make movies, when they tell stories, it's always portrayed as Ruth is beautiful. She might have been. Sarah, Rachel, and Rebecca, and then Esther. But here's our story, Sarah, Rachel, Rebecca. All was clearly identified of their physical character of beauty. But not Ruth. Maybe she was. Makes a good Hollywood story. But there's something, I believe the reason that it's not talking about her physical looks is because then that becomes the story. Instead, what the story is, Boaz comes and he sees this woman who's impoverished, broken, lonely, hurting, suffering loss, an alien, a stranger in a land that's not hers. And something moves in Boaz. And as I will say, love begins to move. And Boaz is drawn to Ruth, even though, as we'll read the story, he doesn't think when he does end up marrying her, he had no idea that she would choose him because of whatever the reason would be. But love begins to move in this Boaz. And the beauty of the story that God is showing us here is 2,000 years ago, love began to move. And he walked this earth. His name was Jesus Christ. And his story is about finding the aliens, the strangers, the cast off, the ones who are unloved, the ones who are hurting, the ones who are heartbroken, the ones who are in poverty and bankruptcy and have no land of their own. And love began to move, and love walked on this earth, and his name was Jesus. And as we read this amazing story that we see here is we have a greater than Boaz. Our greater than Boaz is Jesus Christ. And he walks and he's looking, and he's still walking and moving today, and he's walking and moving in this sanctuary right now. He's looking for anyone. I see your hurt. I see your pain. I see your separation, but I am love in motion. And I come and I draw. And he tells us this story, and he wants to tell us a story from Tamar and Judah through the birth of Christ, through David. And he gives us this intersection here in the book of Ruth about the story who came out of this crazy story of Genesis 38, of who God is and his grace and his love and his mercy. And in verse 30, Ruth 3, the summation of that is 5 through 9, and Naomi speaking, and she said, all that you say to me, I will do. So this is the counsel that Naomi gave her, because we'll see the last verse here, that Boaz is a redeemer, a close relative. So she went down to the threshing floor. So they bring it in the harvest. They throw the wheat from the chaff blows away, a big pile of wheat, and then the landowners sleep at the foot of it, so bank robbers and thieves and those type of things, because this is the big harvest. He's sleeping there, and it says in verse 7, and after Boaz had eaten and drank, and his heart was cheerful, he went and lay down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly, uncovered his feet, that would be his robe over, and garment, and lay down. There's no immodest. There's nothing that she's doing that is improper. Now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, who are you? She said, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. Kinsman redeemer, a goel, is what we read of when we read through the Mosaic and Levitical law. You are my near kin, and what we just read in Genesis 38, you can redeem me, and you can fulfill the loss of my husband and the loss of Naomi's husband. And so this is what she's saying to him. He gives 6 heapings and doesn't touch her and says, hey, okay, go home. I hear what you're saying. Gives her these 6 big heapings. Go home, and I'm going to take care of it. And the 6 heapings, Naomi knows what it means, because when she walks in with the big 6 heapings, Naomi knows he's sending the message, I will not rest until I see this through. But he tells her, Ruth, there is a near kin. It has to go in order. And if he won't do it, I'll do it. But if he does it, then it's the law he does. And so then we have Ruth 4, verse 11 through 12. As it ends, we're going to see this marriage happens. Boaz comes down to the gate, and all the people who were at the gate, the elders, said we're witnesses. And Boaz goes down to the gate. He's waiting for the nearer kin to come. He goes, hey, brother, come on over. I need to talk. Listen, the field that Naomi, Elimelech, owns is up for redemption. If you don't want it, I'll buy it. And then he goes, I'll do it. He goes, oh, and one other thing. You also have to take the widow Ruth with it. And he goes, oh, no. No thanks. I don't want all that. You buy it. And Boaz says, I'll do it. And here's our picture of our greater than Boaz. Our Jesus, Matthew 13. For the treasure that was in the field, bought the whole field. And here's this picture of Boaz. I'll buy the whole field. I don't care how much it costs to get this treasure, to get this bride. And as the story weaves itself, and all the people who were at the gate, and the elder said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephraim and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house, there's no shame. There's no hey, let's pretend this never happened, Genesis 38. May your house be like the house of Perez, who Tamar bore to Judah, because the offspring which the Lord will give from this young woman. Why like Perez? Because Book of Ruth, verse 18, as it closes, now this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David. The king will come through Matthew 1, and then we take communion. The book of the genealogies of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac begot Jacob. Jacob begot Judah and his brother. God's not ashamed to say this, and he's not ashamed to say you're in his heritage too. Judah begot Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz by Rahab. Boaz begot Obed by Ruth. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David the king. David the king begot Solomon by her who had been with Uriah. Verse 17, so all the generations. Verse 18, now the birth of Jesus Christ was as followed. Lord, as we come and we take this cup that is in our hand, what can separate us from the love of God? We hold a promise in our hand. We think Genesis 38, probably better left unsaid, but you record it for a purpose. Beyond the diamond of a Joseph to the black backdrop of a Judah, the most sparkling diamond, as though Satan may wanted to destroy the line, all the line of the sons of Jacob. Starting here, he's a sniper and he will pick off one at a time. He thought he accomplished through Joseph. Now he's going to pick off Judah. And yet we see that nothing can stop our God from accomplishing these things. The dream will come to pass. They will come to Egypt. They will bow down. Satan will lose. And even the destruction trying to destroy through Judah, through Tamar, that cannot be stopped. And you will turn that mess into the great bless, that our God would come down. Our greater than Boaz would come and buy the whole field to get the bride, us. And we know it's true because we hold the bread. The world asks for Judah. I want it all, the person, the possession, and the position. And here you are, you came and you gave it all. Down to your body and down to your blood. You paid it all. The God became man. God taking on the shame of sinful man. You paid it all so that you might say it is done. But on the third day you rose again, victorious. We thank you that you were willing to take the cross. And we take this bread and we do it in remembrance of you. And likewise, after supper, you took the cup. You said, this is the cup of the new covenant. I thank you for the new covenant. It's not based on my performance. The 10 elders and witnesses there at the gate between Boaz and the nearest kinman. What a picture of 10 commandments that condemned us. And they couldn't redeem us because that would mean perfection. It had to be a greater than the commandments. It had to be a greater than Boaz. And you are a greater than Boaz through the new covenant that you took on our sin and you took on every last drop of the punishment to come. And the new covenant is based on he who knew no sin became sin for us that we might become the righteousness of God. And you did this through the new covenant, and we can celebrate it. And none of us have to live in defeat because we know the victory has been won. And we know a God who won't cast us off nor ever disown us. Even all of our stories of faults and failures, you say they're mine. We take this cup and we do it in remembrance of you. Amen. And we praise you, Lord, and I thank you for this word. And we're going to have a special time because we have a special, God gave us two ordinances, communion and baptism. Baptism, it's a picture of what God's done. Taking the old man, burying, the new man arising, Romans chapter 6. The old man's left, the new man comes, and the new man gets to make the witness and the declaration of, I've decided to follow Jesus. Let the whole world know I'm not turning back. So I am going to ask John to come up. I'm going to make sure I take off all of my electronics. And John's going to share what the Lord has done in his life.